All right, good afternoon, folks. It's the Comics Workshop live draw. The Monday live draw falls on a Tuesday this week. And we're going to dive right in. We've got some history comics to do today. So I'm looking forward to drawing with you. If you've got a pencil, pens, markers, erasers, and I happen to have a text from New England history that I'm working on. Well, I'll show you what I'm doing here. So I'm going to pull up my desk cam just a sec. There we go. Okay, so this is part of, today we're going to draw part of my Who is Jeremiah Crocker project. I'm looking into the history of slavery in New England. And I am drawing my story, just format-wise, I'm drawing my story on 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper here. And I'm drawing it on, each page is half of a sheet. So this is digest size. I just take a sheet, fold it in half, and I have 2 pages I can draw there. Now, just to make things a little standard, I actually took a sheet of paper, folded it up, and I folded it into quarters, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I folded it into thirds, 1, 2, 3, and I drew lines on it so I can actually trace panels on here. For example, today I want to draw a page that's going to have 3 tiers. That is, it's going to have like 3 vertical levels. Let me switch this around so this clip isn't blocking my page. I'll have 3 vertical levels and then probably 1 panel on each, but I could have 2 panels. You can see the lines, can't you? I can see the lines just barely through the paper. So let's start with a pencil. I'm going to trace out roughly where those tiers are. And this can be kind of hand-drawn. I like my borders to be a little wiggly. If I wanted them super straight, I could get out a ruler and I could get those lines just the way I want them. I kind of like them a little wiggly. And I'm keeping away from the very edge of the page and away from that fold. And when I, oops, this goes all the way down to that line there. See, that's why I use a pencil to start with. So when I make a little mistake, I just keep on rolling. I can erase it or leave it. There's my first tier. There's my second tier. That one looks a little bit shorter, doesn't it? Probably because it's getting to the edge of the page. So I'll nudge this one up a little bit. Maybe that line does go there. And if that looks about right to my eyes, it's going to look about right to a reader's eyes. If later I decide I want those lines super straight, I can go in with a ruler and straighten, right? Okay. So, boy, the sun's shining in here. Let me move down a little bit. Nice sunshine today. All right, the other thing that I'm doing is as I draw them on a half sheet size, I can actually, let's see, I'm actually going to scan them in and shrink them down so that I can make them into a smaller, this is half size of the half sheet, right? So I can make them into a smaller book and I can fit up to 8 pages on a single sheet of paper, single-sided, fold it up into a mini comic book. And then I tuck it into my pocket here. And anybody asks me, what are you working on now? I pull out a mini comic and give them a copy, right? Which is a really cool thing to be able to do. So this is a page that will go into a later issue of Who is Jeremiah Crocker? And the story I'm working with right now, actually, I'll show you the original page. So I have here it is. I took a little excerpt from the town history of Marlborough, Mass. And it's the Howe family history. Now, this book was published in 1862, and it mentions that Reverend Smith sold a Negro servant or slave, Dill Oxford, to Joseph Howe Sr. for 66 pounds. That's in 1777. So I'm really interested in this history of slavery in New England because there's so much hidden history here, right? And what I'm doing here is I'm going to draw out this person. Her name is Dill Oxford. So here she is as I've drawn her. They say the family will not be displeased by the addition of another person, long a favorite in the family. Dill Oxford is not by birth related to the Howe family, but she's included in the Howe family history because of her connection with the family. So in 1777, Reverend Mr. Smith actually sells her to Joseph Howe for 66 pounds. Now, I don't know what any of these people look like, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm drawing them as little figures, little stick figures with as few features as possible. I'm really intrigued that so many of the ministers in these early towns are involved in slavery in one way or another. And it turns out, as I've been researching this, it turns out that in places like Connecticut, half the ministers by the late 1700s actually owned slaves. Because they tended to be more well-to-do, they tended to do a lot of work away from their farms and their homes, and they purchased people to do the work at home for them. In this case, Reverend Mr. Smith is selling Dill Oxford. This woman doesn't give her age. I don't know what she looked like, but I'll draw her as a stick figure. She gets sold to Joseph Howe Sr. Now, my connection to this is the Howes were one of the first families to come to my town in New Hampshire, and they were the first family to introduce slavery into my town in New Hampshire. So I'm very interested in what this history tells us about my town, about other towns in New England, about our country. The other thing that caught my eye here is Dill Oxford. Well, the next thing we learn is the state constitution in Massachusetts of 1780 made all such persons free. They gradually emancipated slavery, the enslaved people of Massachusetts. However, Dill from choice remained in the family of father and son. So she stays with the Howe family, which happened a lot actually, because where's she going to go? Right? All her life, she's been in the Smith family or the Howe family. She has nowhere else to go, but she remains in the family until the day of her death. And I'm just going to have a black square here that says date and location not recorded. Her full life history is not here. But the other amazing thing this says, let's look at this text that we're going to draw now. And I'm going to use stick figures. It's not going to be detailed artwork because I don't know what any of these people look like. She was highly esteemed in the family and neighborhood. So let's use that as our first tier here. We'll just make this a little smaller. We'll keep it out there. And we'll use that exact phrasing here. Got to move down as the sun shines in. She was highly, and I'm trying to balance, I want to have exactly the text used in the primary source, but I also don't want to load up the reader with too much to read. I've been putting my primary source texts into these boxes and giving them little curls on the top corner and the bottom corner. She was highly esteemed in the family and neighborhood. So maybe we'll put down here, in the family and neighborhood would fit, right? I wonder if I can turn off this light. That might help with the light here. Now I'm getting a lot of glare. I better keep that light on to keep the light steady. I'm thinking if I put it like this and we read down left to right and across, then probably I could fit her here. I'm not sure what kind of work she did, so maybe I'll just draw her walking. And over here, this by the family and neighborhood, they pretty much mean the Howe family. And by that, they mean the non-African-American family that owned her, right? That's the tricky thing in these 19th century narratives is, well, we saw it already. We saw it already, right? They say, Reverend Mr. Smith sold a Negro servant or slave. And that is the exact phrasing in the book, in the 1862 writing of this 1777 sale. And I wanted to keep that. It's awkward, it's uncomfortable, but I wanted to keep that because that phrase, a Negro servant or slave, is unlocking a lot of secret history for us. It tells us these terms are used interchangeably in this history. So when they say the family and neighborhood, they're not talking about the African-American community. of Marlborough, Massachusetts. They're talking about the Howe family. I'll leave all these little stick figures blank white, and I'll color her in dark. And that's as far as I can go to know what they look like at all in this story. And that's what we're working with here with this history. I'm trying to draw actually as little as possible because I don't want to imagine a lot of details in here. I want to stick to my primary source texts and see what they tell us. Now, here's where it gets really cool because I feel like so much of this history is hidden and obscured and intentionally forgotten because maybe it's a little painful. But then every now and then a character comes through. Her rig, meaning her clothing, was peculiarly hermaphroditical, wearing a skirt or petticoat like a female and a coat after the fashion of a man. So we get this glimpse of this amazing character. We may never know anything more about her, except that she dressed in this unusual style. So she's mentioned in the town history. Let's see. So maybe this will be a panel. Maybe we'll do a whole panel here. Should I use the word rig? Yeah, let's use it. What we'll do is we'll draw clothing in here so you'll know what it means. Peculiarly. I hate when I have to, maybe I don't have to split that word. Let's use pencil power to erase and replan all this text. I apologize for the lighting here. I know it's hard to read these pencils with the light shining in here. We're hitting that time of year where the light shines in at an angle and it's starting to get on my desk here. So it makes it a little hard to see. But that's kind of the point of penciling. It doesn't have to be easy to see because I'm going to ink it in a moment. Hermaphroditical. Hermes meaning male, Aphrodites meaning female, I guess, from the Roman gods. Do that. We'll put the little curls on the ends, showing that this comes from our primary source. What does it tell us? Her rig was peculiarly hermaphroditical, wearing a skirt or petticoat like a female and a coat after the fashion of a man. I'm going to change that wording a little bit to simplify it. And I won't put it in the box because this is my own wording. I'll just say skirt or petticoat. And maybe we'll do like a double-breasted 18th century style coat. Something simple. Coat like a man's. All right, and now we'll actually show her dressed like this, maybe to emphasize it. It doesn't say if she lived into the 19th century, but I'm thinking to emphasize it, I might give her like a 19th century top hat or something. I was trying to think of like an 18th century, well, let's try a couple different options. Such was her ordinary and holiday appearance. Such was her ordinary and holiday appearance. Now I should credit my source when I'm taking primary source texts from someplace, but I actually already did that on an earlier page. I said, I'm going to put a little box around this, I think. Dill, Oxford, from the History of the Town of Marlborough, Mass, 1862. And I think I'll black in this little box so the quotes start here and I need to end the quotes here. There we go. And I'm thinking she'll be walking along. So now I have to draw her differently. I'll stick to the stick figure, but she'll be wearing a coat. Maybe it's one of those long coats that they would wear in a frock coat. That's what it's called. And then skirts. And now we have to draw some guys like watching her as she walks by. I'm getting really close to the edge here. I'm going to scan this carefully and make sure I get that. I don't recommend drawing out to the edge for your own comics. Don't try this at home, folks. And let's give her like a 19th century top hat. This is a person who is making her own rules, even though there's this history of enslavement, this history of people treating her as property, right? People treating her as if she doesn't matter, like not even recognizing and recording the date of her death, when the Howe family themselves are all listed here: birth dates, marriage dates, death dates, where they died. I mean, look here in the primary source. Some of the kids up here: Josiah was born March 20th, 1824, died in Cuba, 1848, unmarked grave. I mean, all this information is recorded about the Howe children, but this family favorite woman, they don't record any information except where she breaks the rules, makes her own rules about how to dress, and just establishes herself as a character, right? I love this. It's like history is this so much of history is this blank white page with stuff that wasn't written down and we'll never know for sure. These guys are shocked. And every now and then those blank pages part and you see this person peeking through, this character, this person who's not like anybody else and is so much like everybody else because of that, right? So that's what I live for, just that we can find these stories still and they're out there. Let's try to get this camera in focus a little more. All right, so this sun is getting brighter. It's getting harder to read these pencils. I think we have a basic page here, right? So I'm going to go in now with my inking tools. I'm going to check on the comments. Good. All right, leave comments or questions if you have any, folks. I'm going to keep on steaming ahead here, and I'm going to ink this in. So you saw I followed my guides to get rough tiers, right? So I think what I'll do is I'll ignore these tiers now. I won't ink necessarily that box there, but I'll bring this down and ink these text boxes. Now, after this, I'm going to scan this in, right? And boost the contrast until it's a completely black and white image. So I'm doing it with black ink. I'm also lettering a little bigger, or a lot bigger, than is absolutely necessary. I could write that smaller and you'd be able to read it just fine, right? All of this, when I draw these pages and I draw them on a half sheet, digest size, I could write a lot smaller than this and you'd be able to read it. But remember, my goal is to shrink it down to this pocket size, right? So that means all this internal text here has to be double sized in the original. So I'm drawing and writing it double sized. The other thing I really notice when I go back and draw here, it doesn't feel right to draw Dill Oxford now just as this blank stick figure here, right? That's too simple because now we know something about Dill Oxford as a person, as a character. That Dill Oxford did not try to fit in with all the other stick figures and dress like how society told her or told them to dress, right? That Dill Oxford is this really interesting person who's looking at us through these family histories, who somehow managed to survive and get into the family history of her enslavers as a character. And she can look out of these family histories at us now. And a tiny, tiny piece of her story, at least, is told. I mean, that's such an amazing thing. That's what I live for when people manage to get their stories into the record in spite of all odds. When I work with Freeman Colby's diaries, It's sort of like, yeah, he wrote his diary. He was a Civil War vet. It was kind of, it's great that he did, and it's great. It's a triumph that that history was recorded. But the playing field was kind of slanted in his direction. You know, he had family, he had a town that started a historical society to record the stories of people like him. Dill Oxford, on the other hand, her story survives despite those histories, despite the tendencies of local histories to exclude her, which is so inspiring. You notice I'm moving these letters a little bit as I ink because they're getting a little close to the edge. I like the ability here. In comics, you get to do this. You take things a little out of context and show them on their own right. I guess I could have done, I don't know why I thought of it this way. I could have maybe done a big panel of her really large with little pointers showing the different parts of her dress. But for some reason, my imagination said, okay, break it down into 3 panels like this. Second panel, first panel, we show the social relations, at least that she walked around and was highly esteemed. Seems like she had some kind of respect from the family and the neighborhood. Maybe she went out and walked around. Maybe she did housework. Maybe she did work outside the home. Sometimes enslaved people in New England were sent out to do work that their masters, their enslavers couldn't do. Always they add to the strength and skills of their enslavers and made their enslavers wealthier. Well, I shouldn't say always, but that was how the system was supposed to work. I mean, that's why you have ministers. So many of the ministers, at least in southern New England, owned slaves because that freed them up to go off and do their ministerial duties. And when they're ready, when they no longer need enslaved labor to support their lifestyle, well, they can cash in here. And the Howes were clearly a wealthier family. If they could put together that much money to purchase a person, to enslave a person from the minister in town, clearly the Howes have some family money or have some money somehow. That's maybe a clue as to why the Howes were one of the first families to come up and settle here in my town in New Hampshire, and they brought along slavery with them. So funny thing that happens, not funny at all, but when you look through the history of the town and you look at all the papers that are signed and the committees formed and the decisions made in town meeting, the name of Howe comes up a lot because they were involved in building the town. And one of the reasons they could build the town was they had slave labor supporting them. So that's what I've been looking at with this project. Like this is very unusual that Dill Oxford's name is in this account, right? A lot of these accounts, it just says, like here in Henniker in New Hampshire, the name of the enslaved person who was the first enslaved person brought into town in 1763, before there was even a town here. The name says in the town history book, cannot be ascertained. That means nobody wrote it down, right? Nobody recorded her name, just like nobody saw fit to, they mention the day of Dill Oxford's death. Nobody sees fit to record it in this history that I'm using. I shouldn't say that. Maybe it is recorded somewhere. Okay, we're on our third panel here. Such was her ordinary and holiday appearance. Holiday appearance, that's an interesting term. I mean, you can pick these accounts apart. Holiday appearance means she went out or was visible during the holidays in some form. Here in Henniker, New Hampshire, if you look into the history of the town, you realize there are accounts that in the churches here, There were what they called the Negro pews. There were enough enslaved people here in town in the early days that they had their own segregated pews in the churches. But you kind of have to dig through the history to find that out. It's almost like you're not supposed to know that history is here. And I wonder now about the town of Marlborough, like where did that culture come from? Did Dill Oxford go out on the holidays, or was she part of the Howe family hosting on the holidays? She had a holiday, an ordinary and a holiday appearance. We know that at least from this account. Here's her skirt. I'm moving her petticoat up slightly to get it away from the edge of the page. Foot. And these hats are jumping off of these Marlborough Mass gentlemen. Because she's such a character that she survives, she persists, she exists, right? In the town history, in spite of all odds. Oh my gosh. So now I'm going to go through and I'll erase all my pencil lines. I may do one more page here. I'll combine it with all my other pages telling Dill's story, and I will post those over on the Patreon so you can check them out. I think that's all we're going to do today, folks, but that's a little glimpse of what some of this work looks like as we dig into our local history, and I'm drawing it out, but I'm trying to draw as little as possible so I stick to the bare bone facts, right? If you have history about slavery in New England from your area, whether you're in New England or another part of the world, I'd love to hear about it. There's just so many connections here to make, so many hidden histories and so many people who, they're waiting for us to find them. I feel like they're waiting for us to find their stories. So I'm going to go erase this. I'll scan it in and I'll post it. I'll post links to my my primary source texts and to the Patreon too, so you can check out those printables and the rest of the Jeremiah Crocker story, because this is I'm excited to get this all together and share it with you. All right, thanks for stopping in, folks. Have a wonderful day. Good luck with all your comics, and we'll see you soon for another live draw.